Today, the topic, what we will have to discuss within the next 45-50 minutes is, I think it's a very exciting one, it's a very controversial one as well. And I would like to start with a story. It's a real story, true story, that happened just a week ago. Not so much more than a week ago, a week and a half ago. There was a football game, a soccer game in Leipzig. You've probably seen it. Germany against Israel in a wonderful stadium. It's if you have not seen the Leipzig stadium, I really recommend everyone. It's a gorgeous stadium. 43,000 people fit in there. And it's a wonderful occasion. The first time ever in the former East Germany, in Leipzig, the Israeli team comes to play against Germany. And it's a fantastic occasion. And I serve as a rabbi of the community in Leipzig. And many people ask me, what do I think about the game? Is it, who am I supporting? Am I for Israel or am I for Germany? And this is, even though probably you would think the answer is simple. What would you say? Who am I for? I'm asking you now. You say Israel. My question is, why do you think it's so simple for me as a Jew living in Germany to be for Israel? Is it true? Is it not? I will answer this later. But the topic what we would like to discuss today is Jews living in the non-Jewish world and how we relate to the world, the other nations in the world. Now, probably you all have heard this famous expression that the Jewish nation is a chosen nation. Can I ask you, what do you think? What does it mean, chosen? What's your name? Yeah. Faina. What does it mean, a chosen people? The Jewish people are chosen people.
Chosen from what? To do traditions, to learn Torah.
So, very good. So you say the Jewish people is chosen, not just stamazoi, not just simply chosen. They are chosen for a certain purpose. If we analyze well the first source where we see this idea, this is in the second book of Moses, in Sefer Shemot, and in the parasha that is discussing the portion that is discussing the 10 commandments in the weekly portion of Yitro, where Hashem says, God says to the Jewish people, V'yitem li am segula, you will be a chosen nation for me, mikol ha'amim, from all the other nations. But this is not enough, because the verse goes on and say that it's not only for the whole world. You have to be a chosen people. You have to be a chosen people for a whole world. Now, what does that exactly mean? Over there, if you take a look at the commentaries, there are many, many different commentators who explain this. What does it mean? Am segula, chosen people. And the one commentator I would like to go along with is the Sforno. Rav Ovadia Sforno was a very exciting personality in Italy in the 16th century. Rav Ovadia Sforno wrote a very excessive, wonderful commentary on the Torah. And he says that the Jewish people are chosen from all the nations, but all the other nations are also incredible high. Why? We read in the first book of Moses, at the book of Genesis, in Bereshit, that every human being is created at God's image. All of us, every single human being in the world, has a spark, has a bit of God in him, so to say. A godly image, a godly spark. All of us in the world, every single human has that. That is an amazing thing. Above that, the Jewish people have a special level of obligations. It doesn't mean that to be chosen, that the others are like nothing, it means that all the other people are also very precious, but the Jewish people has to be, an example has to be even more precious amongst them. Now, very often, there are controversial sources in the Jewish literature as well. What happens with the other people in the world? Do you know that there's a concept of Olam Haba? Do you know what it means, Olam Haba? Olam Haba means the next world, the spiritual world. And we say, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek la'olam haba. All the Jews have a share in the world to come. All of us have a share in the world to come. The question is, what about the non-Jewish nations? Do they have a share in the world to come? I'm asking you. So the answer, what our sources say, that tzadikei umot olam, the righteous people of the other nations, they also have a share in the world. There's one very interesting Mishnah. The Mishnah is a Cohen-sized little poem, so to say, about halacha that is the first part of the Talmud, and in the tractate Sanhedrin that is dealing with the world to come in the last chapter. There's a Mishnah that is listing the people who do not have a share in the world to come. Who do not have a share in the world to come. And there is one non-Jewish prophet. This non-Jewish prophet was a real evil person, according to the Jewish scripture. His name was Bil'am. And he says, Bil'am, this really, really evil person, does not have a share in the world to come. What is implied with that? If this very evil non-Jew does not have a share in the world to come, that means all the non-Jews also have a share in the world to come who are not so evil as Bilam. Which is quite remarkable that unlike other religions, if you take a good look, all other monotheistic religions say that a person can have a share in the future world or the Eden Garden or in the paradise if they accept the religion. In the Jewish terms, this is not so. Actually, I think we already discussed it the last time I had the chance to be here and speaking about the Jewish calendar. I told you that it's very remarkable that the two other big religions, Christianity and Islam, they start counting their time from their prophet. When do the Jews start counting the time? The logical should be we should start counting when the Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai, when they received the Torah, or from Moses. But this is not where we start counting the time. Where do we start counting the time? The creation of the world. We count the time that includes every single person in the world. From the very first man, Adam, we include everybody. And this is very remarkable to see that the Jewish religion, this is our main relationship to the other nations in the world. It's not that if somebody doesn't accept our rules the way we have, they are like non-existent, like in other religions. They are doomed for eternal suffering. No, it's not so by us. If a person adopts a certain righteous way, then the nations in the world, other nations in the world, they also have a share in the world to come. This is, I believe, very, very remarkable. There was one, and when I was preparing this year, I came across a lot of names from rabbis who were from Germany. I think it's quite remarkable that rabbis in Germany, I'm talking about very traditional rabbis, who always mentioned about the positive character traits about the nations where they were living around. They said, for example, one of the commentators on the Mishnah, this commentator is called the Tiferes Yisrael, he says that we have to be gracious. We have to thank for non-Jews. For example, you've heard the name of Gutenberg? You heard the name of Gutenberg? Who was Gutenberg?
That's the first book.
Correct. The first printing press. So he says, the Tiferes, he says, we have to be thankful for the person who invented the printing press. Because of that, we can print books and we can share the books all over the world. It's amazing. He also mentions one of the German doctors, I'm not sure who he's referring to, could be that the one who invented penicillin, that it's a great thing. Thank you so much that you contributed to the world. It's a very remarkable thing. We have to have a certain thankfulness towards the other nations. It's a very interesting thing when we read in the first book of Moses the story of our forefathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yakov. When Yakov comes back with his whole family to the land of Israel, throughout a lot of hardships, he settles right opposite a city. The city is called Shechem. And the Torah uses the term Vayichan et Penei Ha'ir. He settled. The word Yichan comes from the word Machaneh, camp. He made the camp right opposite the city. But if you take a good look at the Hebrew words, the word Vayichan can be understood also as Chen. Who knows what does it mean in Hebrew? Chen? Beauty. And according to our sages, he made the face of the city beautiful. Yakov comes to a certain city. He has not been living there. Brand new experience. I'm sure you're all familiar with Russian Jews coming to Germany or Hungarian Jews ending up in Germany. He comes to settle down in the land of Israel opposite the city, and the first thing, he makes the city nicer. The sages explain that he made a bathhouse. He built, according to one variant. The other variant said that he built a marketplace. He made the life of the people easier, or he made the more hygienic, more bathhouses. It's also very useful, especially in those times when people did not have showers at home. So either explanation you take, the message is clear. You come to a certain place. It's not Jews live there. Absolutely nothing to do. Your goal is to make that place a nicer place. You have to make it nicer. You have to add something. This is to translate to our terms. I'm sure you all go to university. You have different classes. You have your little own circles wherever you move around. The idea, what we take from Yaakov Avinu, is whatever you do, wherever you are, you always have the chance to add something more, to make something nicer. Let's say somebody who lives in a Jewish community and likes to come, he's going to help with the Morasha program, for example. Or somebody who writes a Dvar Torah and prints it on a paper. Or somebody who lives in a Wohngemeinschaft and he just cleans the apartments once in a while. Everyone has the chance to make his environment nicer. So this is also a way we Jews have to relate to the world outside. Also, very, very important thing, and this is the first part actually you probably realized, the one I'm speaking about is how we Jews have to behave towards the world outside. According to most of the opinions, is a Jew always have to be polite. You know, wherever you go and whatever you do, the people will always judge the Jewish people based on what you do. If they know that you're Jewish, which most of the cases this is the story, they do know that you're Jewish, they're going to say that this is the way what Jews do. I feel very bad. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we were in the zoo with my family, with my 2 daughters. And I have a bad habit, and this is to grab my small daughter. She's very small. She's very tiny, like 1.5. And I grab her clothing here and lift her up like a little puppy. It doesn't look too nice for the outside world, even though obviously she doesn't mind anything, and for me it's very convenient. So she was running away in the zoo, in the park, and I grabbed her and lifted her up like this. And then I realized the other parents who were with the children look at me like this. And I feel bad because I have a kippah on my head. So looking back, I made a huge mistake. I should have slowed down. I should have behaved completely, even though obviously my daughter will not be psychologically damaged from this act that I'm holding her like this. But still, what other people could think, they're going to think, oh, this is the way Jews handle their children. This is a barbarian thing. This is terrible. And unfortunately, everyone makes a mistake like that. We always have to be just aware of how we're doing, or how we relate to these situations. there's also a very famous story about a certain slaughterhouse, a certain place in Argentina. You probably know that the cheapest cow meat you can get today is in Argentina, and a lot of Jews who get kosher meat from kosher cow meat, they go to get it from Argentina. There are big slaughterhouses and big firms that are preparing a lot of cows. And they export it to America, to North America, even to Europe, even to Israel. And in this slaughterhouse, this is a real story, true story that happened. There were a lot of rabbis called shochtim who cut down the animals. And people who work there, mashgichim, rabbis, to make sure that everything is kosher. And there are like 100 people working there. They come in the morning, 100 people go in the evening back home. And there was one local Argentinian guy who was the security man. And in the evening, everyone was out of the building. And they said, you have to close now the slaughterhouse. So he said, no, there's one person that is still missing. He said, how do you know? There are 150 people passing through in front of your door. How do you know that one person is missing? No, one person is for sure missing. One person must be still somewhere in the slaughterhouse. Okay, let's take a look. They go around, and you probably know they keep these big amount of meat cold. They have huge rooms that are for freezing. And they go into one of them, and they find there a rabbi with the big locks, rabbi-looking rabbi, so to say, almost freezing to death. They really have to call the ambulance. And they realize that he was closed in by accident to one of these huge fridges. So they asked the security, how did you recognize that? You know, okay, you can say that the rabbi looked very special. He had a dark suit, a white shirt. You have probably hundreds of people like this passing through your door. How did you know that this person is still in the building? He answered the following. Every single morning when I'm here doing my security job, there's one person every morning who comes and says to me with a smiling face, good morning. And every evening when he goes home, he comes to me with a smiling face and says, have a nice evening. Today, I had my good morning, but I did not have my have a nice evening. It's just a matter of how one politely can behave towards others. People will recognize it. And this is what we call in Hebrew a very, very important concept, Kiddush Hashem. To sanctify God's name in public. To say, oh, these are the way the Jews behave. This is amazing. So this is our job. Also, it's very important to think positively about the environment where one lives. I think this could be also the reason why in the halachic books you will find two different approaches. One approach is that says we have to be very, very reserved to the other nations in the world, wherever we live. The other says, no, we have to be very thankful. If you take a good look where these people were coming from, you will find that we have a lot of rabbis who used to live in a lot of persecutions in the Russian Tsarist era or in the Bolshevik era. But in a more free environment, like in America, the very good example for this is Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was one of the biggest rabbis in America in the 20th century, and he was from Russia. I'm not sure which part of Russia exactly, but I know that his brother has been killed, and then he fled to the United States. And he settled there in New York, in Staten Island actually, where he established his yeshiva. You probably know Staten Island is one of the boroughs of New York City. And he used to call United States Malchut Shel Chesed, the kingdom of good deeds. What does it mean? This was the first time in his life where he was permitted to settle down in a country, do whatever he wishes, live according to his values, and no one's persecuting him. So the way he reacted to this, he called this a malchut shel chesed, a place, a kingship, a ruling of good deeds. He also said that whenever a Jew is going on the street, you always have to think about it like whatever you do is going to be tomorrow on the headlines of the news. Try to think about that, and based on that, you can choose what do you do. Now, this also still not too easy to understand that there are, according to Rav Henkin, one of the American rabbis, he says that there are two types of Jews throughout history. One he refers to as the Tanakh Jew. You know what Tanakh is? Tanakh is the Hebrew Bible. He says that there's an approach of the Jews who used to live in the times of the Tanakh, where people used to live in Israel, the Jewish kingship, a healthy feeling of we are in macht, we are in power. And the other one who refers to is what he calls the Talmud Jew, a person who, according to his beautiful metaphor, a person who is walking between the raindrops. Today, in the society where we live in, we have to understand that it's not time for the Jews to be too strong or too arrogant. This is the opinion of Rabbi Henkin, because this is simply not destined to our world. We are just sojourners. We are people who are living here in Germany, all over the world, as guests. You know, it's a very interesting halakha in the Torah that is brought down, a law that whenever an Egyptian person comes to us and wants to settle amongst Jews, you have to allow him. Why? Because back in the days, currently more than 3,400 years ago, approximately 3,300 years ago, we used to be guests in their country. And you can think, we're talking about the same Egypt? The Egypt where we had to go out of with miracles. They were persecuting us, they were killing our babies, and we still have to remember that we were guests in their country? Yes. This is exactly what you have to do. We have to remember that you were once back in the time, a guest in the country of the Egyptians. Many people ask how, if it's so true that this is the way we have to act towards the society, how could terrible things happen, like the persecutions of the Second World War, the Shoah, and things like that. And there's a saying that our rabbis say that if the Jews, we do not do Kiddush, we do not sanctify the Shabbat, and we do not do whatever we have to do, then the non-Jews will do the Havdalah. Then the non-Jewish society will create the boundaries. If we're not living up to what we have to do in terms of Yiddishkeit, in terms of pursuing our own traditions, then eventually the society will reject us. This seems to be like an oxymoron. It's one would expect that the more you want to be like the people you're living amongst, the more they're going to accept you. It's exactly the opposite. The more you're trying to be like the other nations, the quicker they're going to say, we do not want from you. This is a miracle of the Jewish survival for the last 2,000 years or even more. But may I ask you, if you have to learn from somewhere from the Torah how to act towards non-Jews, where would you look for? Where would you look for a source? Do you know the story of the forefathers? Abraham, Yitzchak, his son. Abraham, how many children did Abraham have? 2. Who was number 1? Ishmael. His first son was Ishmael, not from Sarah. Ishmael, we look at him as the forerunner, the forefather of all the Arab nations, or so to say, the source for the Islam. The other son, who is the forefather of the Jews, was Isaac, Yitzchak. How many sons did Yitzchak have? Two. What were the names of the two children? Esav and Yakov. Wonderful. The twin brothers, Esav and Yakov. Which one is the forefather of the Jews? Yakov. And who is the forefather for Esav for? Who's he? According to our sages, Esav he had another name. His name was Edom. And Edom, in the Talmudic literature, refers to Rome. It's the Western society. So we say that Esav was the forerunner, the forefather, even if it's not in a physical sense, of the Western society. And Ishmael was the forefather of the Arab and Islam society. So, say our sages, if we want to learn how to react towards the other nations, we have to analyze the relationship between Ishmael and Yitzchak, and we have to analyze the relationship between Yakov and Esav, to how we have to relate to the other nations. One very good example for that. Yakov has to run away because Esav is very angry. Esav is very angry because Yakov took away his right as a firstborn, and he took away the blessing from his father, from Yitzchak. So after many, many years, over 20 years, he wants to return to the land of Israel, and he comes back with a family. He has quite many children by then, and the two wives, plus the two servants of the two wives, Leah, Rachel, Zilpa, and Bilha, and with the whole mishpocha, the ganze familia is coming back, and he arrives to the border, and to the border comes his brother to greet him. How does his brother come to greet him? He brings 400 armed men. He brings a whole army. 400 people. What do they want to do with Yaakov? Obviously, they don't want to invite them to a party. The reason why you bring soldiers is you want to make a war. So how does Yaakov react to that? How does Yaakov react to that? He can choose to run away, but this is not what he does. Does he fight back? No, he does not fight back. First of all, he hears what happens. Then he looks for messengers. He looks for people to negotiate. So he sends people forward to negotiate. Not just simply, but with presents. He's offering something to Esav. Please, let's make a peace. We don't have to fight against each other. Here are the presents. And the response is not completely taken, this offer of peace. So then Yaakov personally has to come forth. Does he come? Then he organizes a family to make sure everybody's safe. But then he comes forth and he bows down 7 times to Esav. He bows down. And by the time he comes to Esav, peace is restored. There's one instance in the Jewish history when this was real reality, Jews against Rome. This was around the year 70. In year 70 was the year when the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed. And just a few years before, the war between Israel and Rome, Jews and Rome, the uprising in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, they didn't allow the rabbis to lead things. There were people who were taking things in their hands. They said, no, we're never going to make peace with Rome, under no circumstance. And the rabbis enforced, why don't you want to make peace? Let's offer them. At least we can spare Yerushalayim. We can spare where we are. They said, no way. Not only that, when the city of Jerusalem was surrounded by the Roman army, there was no way coming out and no way coming in. They still had a few more houses with grain where they could make bread. So those Jewish soldiers who said there's no way we will negotiate, rather we're going to die, they burnt down these houses of grain. And this was the time when they smuggled out one of the rabbis, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. 2 of his students Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer, they smuggled him out of the city like he was a dead body, because they allowed the dead bodies to be taken out and to be buried. They even checked whether Rabbi Yochanan is dead, and they found that he was dead, even though he wasn't. So when they came out, Rabbi Yochanan straight away went to, back then it was not yet the Kaiser, the Emperor of Rome, Vespasianus. He goes there and greets him and says, please spare the rabbis of the city and give us the city of Yavne. You probably heard of the name Yavne. Yavne is a small city not so far from Rehovot, Petach Tikva, in the Melkaz in Israel. And he asked, please give us the city so we can spare the rabbis. The city of Jerusalem is done, is doomed. People will uprise and they're going to die. But please, if you give us at least the rabbis, and they give us a possibility to maintain Jewish religion on, and give us a little city, then we'll survive. And if you take a good look, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was right. Today, even though this happened over 1,900 years ago, soon 2,000 years, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai managed to save Judaism and managed to save Yiddishkeit, so today we can still keep on maintaining Jewish religion, which is really remarkable. And if you take a look at this, it only goes through negotiation and offering and asking. With the non-Jewish nations, with Esav and Yakov, it was never a good idea if they make a war. Not only that, if you take a good look, when Yakov ran away from home, it was just the time when Esav went and got married. And who did Esav marry? A daughter of his uncle, a daughter of Ishmael. Our sages say when Ishmael and Esav, the Western world and the Arab world, joined together, this is a time when the Jewish people have to flee. This is the time when we have to run away. I know it sounds very weird, but this is applicable even nowadays. The Western world and Arab society, this is a reality today. There was one more instance in the Jewish history when the two forces of Ishmael and Esav combined. And this was, who was able to tell me when was that? This was about 2,500 years ago. This was the story of Purim. You know the story of Purim more or less? What was the name of the bad guy? Haman. Haman was the bad guy. So Haman was from a certain tribe, the tribe of Amalek. Who was Amalek? Amalek happened to be the grandson of Esav. So Haman was a descendant of Esav. But the Persian society, our sages say, was a descendant of Ishmael. So this person from Esav, Haman, comes to Ishmael, to the Persian society, and says, let's join together hands and let us together perish the Jews. So there's one person, one character in the book of Esther who is not ready to bow down. What was his name? Mordecai. Mordecai, the Jew, is not ready to bow down. I'm asking you a very simple question. I just told you that we Jews learn from Yakov and Esav how we have to behave towards Esav. If Esav says bow down, then what is the correct approach? You should bow down and try to make peace. So my simple question is, how come Mordecai did not do that? The answer you will find, I think it's fascinating. How many children did Yakov have? How many children? 13, that's right. 12 boys plus a girl. Let's focus on the boys. Each boy was a forerunner of a tribe. How many of these boys were born at the time they came back to Esav, to the land of Israel? 11 boys were born. There was still one more boy to come. And this was the last one, the smallest one, Binyamin. It's not a coincidence that Binyamin did not bow down to Esau. And Mordecai, the Jew in Persia, was a great-grandson of Binyamin. Somebody, the only power within the Jewish people, sometimes, this shows us that in certain hard situations, there are some times when we have to actually get up and fight. And this is the power of Binyamin, Mordecai, who was coming from the tribe. This is not a coincidence that the Torah is, and the books of the Tanakh speak of them in this order. Now, another interesting thing, maybe how we can relate to the nations of the world. Who was the forefather of all the nations in the world that exist today? Noah. Wonderful. What's your name? Igal. Wonderful. Igal is helping me out here. So Noah was... how many sons did Noah have, Igal? 3 sons. Fantastic. Names?
I don't know.
Shem, Yafet, the Cham. Shem, Cham, and Yafet. That's right. Wonderful. Our sages say that all the nations have a certain characteristic from these 3 people. What were the characteristics of these people? Cham was the father of Canaan. Canaan in the Torah did not have a very positive profile, so to say. Canaan and the nations around Canaan are people who, according to the Torah narrative, who are way much into physicality. They are carried away by the world. Who was a famous descendant of Yefet? Well, Greece, Yavan, that's right. We say that 70 nations, they all descended from these 3 sons. And Yefet, Greece, was descended from Yefet. Now, if I tell you the word Greece, what is the first thing you think of? Not Euro crisis, something a little bit more ancient.
Mythology.
What?
Mythology. The God's mythology.
Authority? Mythology. I was what we have still from Greece today. Let's put it this way. Philosophy. I would say democracy. My first thing would be, my first association would be, obviously, all of them are good. Mythology, philosophy, all good. I would say democracy. Democracy is, I want to show you why it's important in this context. In a democratic state, how do people make decisions? We vote and we go according to the majority. Right? Whatever the society wants is fine. Whatever the mehrheit, the majority wants, is the correct thing. This is more or less a very oversimplification of democracy. So, we have only one son left, Shem. Who were the famous descendant of Shem? For example, the Jewish people. And what? The Arabs as well. And it's not a coincidence that Shem is the forefather of, in this sense, of all the 3 monotheistic cultures. Because in monotheistic cultures, there's a need for thinking not only from a physical perspective, but from a spiritual perspective. So, if we take these back, so Shem is a spirituality, Cham is physicality, and Yefet is society. So if you take a look at your own selves, whenever you have to make a decision, you usually have 3 components in the decision. One is, what is good for you? From a physical perspective. Is this something I will have a profit from that or no? The second one is, what is good from an intellectual perspective? That is Shem. And the third is, what does society think about what I do? This is Yefet. In all of our decisions, these 3 components are constantly present. What is good? Again, logic, Cham, or physicality, Shem, intellect, spirituality, and Yefet, society, what other people think of what we do. So the correct thing is if you have a balance of these three. That's why all the nations in the world were supposed to be descendants of these three. Noach was the last one who these three powers were still in balance. And our goal is also to find in all of us these balances. The problems come when these balances go to the extremes. Today, I can just give you an example. As I told you, I come from Hungary. And if you follow the news, today, especially nowadays, there are terrible, agitating news coming from what the state of democracy in Hungary, how the government is imposing their own ideas, how ridiculous ideas are winning a lot of space. It is scary. Let's put it this way. It is really scary. It's an overusing of democracy. Just the fact that many more people voted to something, it does not mean that it's necessarily good. Obviously, the same thing. If you have many people who say that this is good for us, but we do not care what is the outcome, that means you put on more physicality, this is cham, this is also not useful. Also, to say the purely spiritual thing, not caring about the people and not care about how they live, is also not so healthy. On the other hand, this last one, Shem, should be more dominant in making decisions. You have to have these three components always, but one has to be more, and this is Shem. That is, so to say, should be the real dominant. Now, just one last step back to how we have to deal with the non-Jewish society. And this is sometimes what I'm speaking now, is more to a certain crowd who's getting used to living in a certain society, a religious society that is very closed. For example, a little circle in Brooklyn, that they don't really see the outer society. But there is an interesting thing. There's one thing in Hebrew, maybe Yigal can help me. What does it mean, Darchei Shalom? The path of peace. Very nice. How you conduct certain peace with other nations. So the Torah says, the Talmud says that if there are Jewish people who are hungry, you have to feed them together with the non-Jewish people who are hungry because of Darchei Shalom, because of a peaceful path. What does that mean? The simple reading is, we actually do care only about the Jewish people, but in order to make sure that nobody's going to feel bad, we should also give the others. This is not the correct reading of Darchei Shalom. Darchei Shalom, if you come to a synagogue every Saturday morning, and we say, before we take the Torah back to the ark, we sing a song, and I'm sure that they sing, Ki lekach tov natati lachem, Torati al ta'azavu, Eitz chayim lamachazikim ba, and here comes the Derachea, its way, Darchei Noam is a pleasant way, V'chol netivotea shalom, and all its surrounding is peace. So from here, this verse, we refer that it's not just simply that in order to make sure that nobody's going to be angry at the other one. No, the way of the world can operate in shalom, in harmony, and not in peace. The peace is probably a wrong translation for the word shalom. Harmony, that means we have to care also about the others. Do you know what is the name of a shtorsh in Hebrew? The shtorsh, the bird with the chasidah. Chasidah is a beautiful word, comes from chasid. That's pious. It's a pious bird. Why is this bird pious? The commentaries on the Torah says the reason is because this bird is so pious, he's feeding all the children of his kind. Not only his own children, but when he comes and brings food to the other birds, he goes to give to children of other birds. So the obvious question is, this Hasidah is such a good bird, why isn't it kosher? a good bird that is not kosher. So Rashi answers, one of the commentators, the reason is because he cares only about his own kind. He does not care about other type of birds. Okay, from biological perspective, you probably do not blame the Hasidah for that. But from the concept perspective, we learn something very serious from here. A real chesed, real good deed, that is, so to say, kosher and proper, is also if you're able to look outside from your own little boundaries outside. So this is why it's called Dalche Shalom, to create a harmonious living together of Jews and non-Jews. And they said, the Talmud lists other things, not just you have to feed the poor, you have to also mevakel cholim, you have to go and visit the non-Jewish sick people. You should go to hospitals to visit non-Jewish people as well. Or all other things. It's not just about that. It's all kind of activities that you do as a good deed towards other people in the society, towards your people. You should be ready to do it also for the non-Jews. This is probably the definition of Dalche Shalom, the path of peace. So I'm wishing you all a wonderful path of peace, Dalche Shalom. And I really want to thank you very much for your concentration and your kindness for listening to me. And have a good night and enjoy the Soccer European Championship.